He told his wife he never wanted to see her again. 3 years later, she returned with a little girl who had his eyes. That night, New York City was humming, wrapped in the usual chaos of taxi horns, bright lights, and the constant rush of people chasing something: success, escape, or simply the next train. Inside a sleek, cold glass tower in New York City, Alexander Miller stood by his office window, contemplating a skyline that no longer inspired him. At 30, he was the CEO of a major investment firm, a self-made millionaire with power and presence to match. Alex was the man others envied. Dark brown hair, eyes like polished ice, an apartment in the clouds, and a reputation for being completely untouchable. And yet, as he loosened his tie and checked his watch, the silence of his life began to scream. When he finally got home that night, later than usual, due to an emergency call from an investor, he noticed the difference before he even opened the door. The penthouse lights were dim, but not in the usual cozy way. The air felt strange, quieter than it should be. The hallway was too tidy. Emma's shoes were missing. The scent of her perfume, always faint and floral, had vanished. He walked in and froze. Emma stood near the entrance, a weekend bag beside her, and her coat already on. She looked calm, almost rehearsed, as if she had been practicing this moment in her mind for months. Her face wasn't sorrowful. It was simply done. That was the part that hurt the most. Not the bag, not the coat, but that expression. The kind of silent goodbye that doesn't need shouting to cut deep. He dropped his keys and squared his shoulders. "What is this?" "I'm leaving," she said in a soft but clear voice. He didn't move. "For how long?" "I don't know," he sighed, shrugging his shoulders as if she were just another problem to manage, another detail in a life full of them. "You're being dramatic, Emma. That's not how we fix things." She managed a small, almost sad smile. "We don't fix anything, Alex. You work, you disappear, you talk to everyone but me. I've been alone in this marriage for years." He looked at her, his jaw tense and his tone sharp. "I gave you everything. This home, this life." "No," she interrupted. "You gave me a role, something pretty for the public, someone to stand next to you at galas. You gave me silence, you gave me space, too much." He turned away, trying to suppress the flicker of pain that crept under his skin. He hated it. The emotion, the rawness, the loss of control. "Then go," he muttered, his voice low. "If you need to leave, then go. I don't care. I don't want to see you again." Her eyes flashed just for a second. Maybe with sadness. Maybe with something more. But she didn't cry. She didn't fight. She simply picked up her bag and walked to the elevator. She didn't tell him she was pregnant. She didn't tell him she had spent the last few weeks terrified, hoping for a reason to stay. He hadn't given her one. The door closed behind her with a soft click. Alex stood alone in the hallway, staring at the empty space where she had been. The silence settled back in, this time heavier, colder. He walked through the apartment, back to the kitchen, the living room, the bedroom. Everything was still there. Furniture, art, clean sheets. But now everything was empty, like a museum of a life someone had already walked away from. He drank a beer. He sat on the edge of the bed and stared into the darkness. He didn't call her. He didn't chase her. And not once did he wonder what she might have been carrying inside her when she left. The return of the past. 3 years passed in a blurred reel of meetings, mergers, flights, and boardrooms. Alexander Miller's life, from the outside, only grew more impressive. His firm was now one of the most influential in the country. He appeared on the cover of several financial magazines and was invited to speak at global economic summits. People called him ruthless, sharp, unbreakable. He became exactly what he had always pursued. But deep down, everything felt numb. Nights were silent. Mornings were mechanical. His home, though still immaculate, felt like a model apartment, perfect on the surface, but untouched by real life. He rarely thought of Emma, or at least that's what he told himself. Her name was a ghost he refused to speak aloud. Whenever it surfaced in his mind, he buried it under numbers, emails, and obligations. What he never allowed himself to ask, never, was if she had moved on, or if she had been hiding something the night she left. Regret was a luxury he refused to admit he possessed. It was a rainy spring afternoon when the unexpected happened. Alex returned home from work early for once, something he almost never did. The penthouse elevator doors opened, and he stepped into the lobby, scrolling through emails on his phone. He barely noticed the woman standing near the security desk until her voice, soft and uncertain, broke the silence. "Alex?" He looked up and his breath hitched. Emma was there, damp from the rain, her brown hair a little longer, her face thinner, but still painfully familiar. She looked exactly as he remembered her, and yet completely different. Stronger, wiser. And beside her, there was a little girl. She was no more than 2 years old. The girl held Emma's hand tightly, her eyes blue, large, curious, and incredibly familiar. She had dark brown hair, slightly wind-tousled, and the same penetrating gaze Alex saw in the mirror every day. He looked at the girl, then at Emma, and back at the girl. "What is this?" he asked slowly, his voice low and cautious. Emma crouched slightly to adjust the girl's jacket, then stood up and looked him in the eyes. "This is Lily," she said. "She's your daughter." He blinked. He almost laughed, but found no humor. "What kind of game is this?" "It's not a game," Emma said, her voice calm and steady. "I was pregnant when I left. I didn't tell you why. You didn't want to see me. You made that clear, and I wasn't going to beg for a space in a life you had already excluded me from." His chest tightened, but he maintained a cold exterior. "And now? Why come back now?" "Because she's asking questions," Emma said. "She wants to know who her father is, and as much as I've tried to explain it, I can't be the only voice in her life. You get to know. Whether you want to be involved or not, that's your decision. But I won't lie, not about you." Lily stepped out from behind Emma's leg and looked at Alex, her small hand clutching her mother's fingers. He felt something shift inside him, something he couldn't name. A mix of emotion, guilt, recognition, and fear. He cleared his throat, suddenly unsure. "A test," he said. "DNA, I want proof." Emma didn't flinch. "Fine. Do what you need to do. I didn't come here to convince you. I came because she deserves the truth. And if the man you are now can't handle that, we'll leave." She turned, gently guiding the girl back toward the elevator. Lily looked back one last time, her blue eyes fixed on his. And then they were gone. Alex stood frozen in the lobby, drenched in silence. His phone vibrated in his hand, but he ignored it. For the first time in years, the past had walked directly into the present, and it had a name, a face, and the eyes of a daughter he never knew he had. The beginning of maybe. The proof arrived within a week. A simple envelope delivered by a messenger, resting on the glass countertop of his kitchen, like a bomb about to explode. Alex sat staring at it for over an hour, unopened, untouched, as if it held the power to undo everything that kept him composed. When he finally broke the seal and unfolded the document, his world narrowed to one single, inescapable truth. Probability of paternity. Lily was his daughter, his blood, his reflection. The first thing he felt wasn't joy. It was nausea, a kind of awareness that while his company grew, his portfolio expanded, and his reputation sharpened, he had missed his daughter's birth, her first steps, her first words. He hadn't just failed as a father. He had failed as a human being. He didn't call Emma right away. He needed time to absorb the weight of it, to understand what it meant beyond biology. But Emma, true to her word, reached out first. Her voice on the phone was calm, but not cold. She said they were still in the city, temporarily staying in a rental apartment near Central Park. She said Lily had been asking questions about the tall man in the lobby, and then she said something that surprised him. She's curious, not angry. She doesn't know enough yet to be hurt, but she will be eventually, if we don't do something about it. Alex asked if he could see them. Not in a courtroom, not in a confrontation, just a meeting. Emma consented, cautiously. A coffee shop on the Upper West Side, neutral territory. Emma would sit at a nearby table, within earshot, but give them space. The moment Lily walked in, wearing a little purple coat, with her dark hair curled at the ends, Alex forgot to breathe. She looked even more like him than he remembered. The way she scrutinized the room, the way her fingers fidgeted with her coat zipper, the way she didn't smile easily. He recognized himself in all of it. "Hello," he said when she stood before him. He was seated to avoid towering over her. His voice was soft, unsure. "You're the man from the tall building," Lily said, not as an accusation, just a fact. "That's me," he said. "My name is Alex." She looked at him curiously. "That's not a father's name." He smiled faintly. "Well, I've never been a father before. I'm still learning." She didn't reply immediately. She climbed into the chair opposite him, her legs too short to touch the floor. She picked up a sugar packet and twisted it into a spiral while watching him from beneath her lashes. "Do you like frogs?" she asked suddenly. He blinked. "Frogs? Yes, I like them. I have a frog book. I actually haven't thought about frogs," he admitted, smiling. "But maybe you can teach me." She seemed to consider him for a moment, then nodded slightly. "Okay." They sat for 30 minutes. She talked more than he expected. About books, about her favorite cartoons, about a dream she had where her toothbrush came to life. He listened to every word as if it were gold. Emma watched from tables away, never interfering, never smiling, just observing like someone too afraid to hope. When they got up to leave, Lily looked up at him. "Are you coming back?" he said honestly. "Do you want me to?" She shrugged. He could work with that. He walked them to the corner where Emma hailed a taxi. As she hugged Lily into the seat, she looked at him over her shoulder. "Are you okay?" He said simply, "This is weird." She didn't answer. He just stood there, his heart pounding, watching the taxi drive away. For the first time in his life, Alexander Miller realized that no amount of money, power, or reputation would ever match the gravity of that one small word. Maybe. It was all he had. But it was enough to start. Building the bridge, the following weeks turned into a strange in-between space for Alex. He still ran a company, attended board meetings, and made multi-million-dollar decisions. But something fundamental had shifted. For the first time in years, he wasn't just thinking about earnings and projections. He was thinking about crayons, storybooks, playdates, and the sound of a little girl's voice telling him about frogs and clouds, and how orange juice was better when it had a little pulp. His calendar, once filled with corporate strategy sessions, now had blocks crossed out with one word written in permanent marker. Lily. At first, the visits were short. A walk in the park, an hour in the children's section of the library, a shared hot chocolate at a bakery where Lily insisted on choosing the table. Emma always stayed close, but never interrupted. She gave them space, even when it was clear how intently she was watching. She was protective, as she had every right to be. But she was also fair. She was allowing Alex to try. She was observing to see what kind of man he would choose to be this time. Lily was cautious. She didn't hug him. She didn't call him Dad. She didn't ask him personal questions. But she kept showing up. She allowed him into her world, little by little, like someone opening a window an inch at a time to see if the outside air was trustworthy. Alex was patient. He didn't push. He read every parenting book he could find. He watched late-night videos on how to talk to children without overwhelming them, how to listen without interrupting, how to be present without performing. He arrived early for every visit. He waited without checking his phone and always brought something small. Stickers, coloring books. Once a toy frog that Lily pretended not to like, but carried in her backpack the next time they met. There were moments when it hurt more than he expected. One afternoon, as they sat on a bench near the lake and watched the ducks swim, Lily turned to him and said, "Do you know how to braid hair?" When he said no, she looked thoughtful and replied, "Mommy knows how." She wasn't being mean. She wasn't comparing. But the truth in her voice cut deep. She had a history he hadn't been a part of, a life that had moved on without him. He didn't say it, but it was written all over her face. She didn't need him. Not really. Yet something kept growing. One snowy day, when Emma dropped Lily off at the museum, she handed Alex an extra umbrella and simply said, "We'll be a little late picking her up. Is that okay?" He agreed without hesitation. He didn't realize until hours later what that moment meant. She had trusted him, fully, for the first time, with her daughter. That afternoon, they walked through the dinosaur exhibit, Lily holding his hand the whole time, unaware that she was doing it. She asked about fossils, about meteorites, about why the T-Rex had such small arms. He made up silly answers, and she laughed. At one point, she looked up at him and said, "You're different than the first time." He asked what she meant, and she shrugged, as children do, and said, "You were more frozen." The word stuck with him for days. He wasn't frozen anymore. Something inside him was thawing, slowly, painfully, and beautifully. And for the first time, he wasn't trying to go back and undo the past. He was just trying to be here, in the present, with a little girl who owed him nothing, but who was beginning, cautiously, to let him in. One evening, after dropping Lily off, Emma stayed in the building entrance instead of leaving. The night was quiet, and the city felt distant, muted under the falling snow. "You're doing better than I expected," she said softly. Alex looked at her, not defensively, not triumphantly, just honestly. "I'm doing the best I can," she nodded, wrapping her coat tighter around herself. "She talks about you, a lot, more than she did before. She still won't call me Dad," he said. "She will, when it feels right. It's not a title, Alex, it's a relationship. You're building it." He didn't reply. There was nothing to say, only gratitude. Only the quiet, growing hope that maybe, just maybe, the girl who once didn't know his name might one day call him something more, or something that meant today. The unthinkable decision. The bombshell arrived without warning, as bombshells often do. It was a late summer afternoon when Emma called. Her voice was calm, but unusually direct. She said she'd been offered a new job in Boston, an opportunity too good to pass up. Better salary, flexible hours, a leadership role at a firm she had admired for years. She wasn't calling to ask permission. She was informing him, respectfully, but firmly. The move would happen at the end of the month, and of course she was taking Lily. Alex was in the middle of his office when he got the call, holding the phone to his ear while staring out the window, his reflection barely visible in the glass. The city stretched out below him, vibrant with opportunity and movement. And yet, everything felt like white noise. He had expected something like this, eventually. Emma had always been ambitious, always seeking the next challenge. But the reality of it hit him harder than he could admit aloud. She was leaving. Again. And this time, she wasn't going alone. She was taking his daughter with her. "You're just going to leave?" he asked, trying to keep his voice level. "I'm not disappearing," she replied. "We'll call. We'll visit. You can come to Boston. But this job matters to me, and Lily deserves stability." Alex closed his eyes. "I just started building something with her. You know that. You've seen it." "I know," Emma said. And for the first time in the call, he noticed emotion creeping into her voice. "That's why I told you now, so we could talk like adults, like parents. I'm not trying to hurt you, Alex." "But you will," he said. "You already are." The silence that followed was long and heavy, filled with things neither of them knew how to say. When they ended the call, there was no resolution, just the understanding that something had to be done, and fast. Alex called his lawyer the next day. He didn't want to fight. He didn't want courtrooms, depositions, or posturing. But he also couldn't let Lily slip away. Not again. He had allowed it once, and it had cost him 3 years of her life. This time, he wouldn't stand by. The documents were filed within a week, a formal petition for shared custody, with a specific objection to relocation outside the state. Emma was surprised to receive it, not because she didn't expect resistance, but by how serious it was. The documents were precise, thorough, professional, but not aggressive. There were no personal attacks, no dramatic accusations, just facts. And one line that stood out more than the rest. The petitioner believes it is in the minor's best interest to have continuous and consistent access to both parents. The courtroom truth. The court date came quickly. Too quickly. They sat across from each other in the family court chamber. Both dressed in muted tones. Both with eyes that looked tired and hearts that felt heavy. Lily was with a court-appointed specialist in a nearby room, coloring with markers and chatting about frogs and spaceships while her parents fought, quietly and courteously, over who would witness her growing up. Alex's lawyer presented his case efficiently. He had become an active presence in Lily's life. He had proof of visits, photos, school events, even a video of them reading together at the library. He was no longer the absent father who let her go 3 years ago. He had changed. He had earned the right to stay. Emma didn't deny any of it. She spoke with grace, explaining her reasons for the move, how much she had thought about it, how she believed she was doing what was best for her daughter. She didn't attack Alex. In fact, at one point, she even said, "He has become a good father. I see that, and I'm proud of what he's doing." It wasn't enough to stop the legal process, but it shifted the atmosphere. Then came the moment no one had fully prepared for. The judge wanted to hear from Lily. She was only 4, but old enough to understand simple questions. With the consent of both parents, she was brought into the room with a specialist, gently guiding the conversation. The courtroom waited while the girl's words were relayed through official notes. Her answers were innocent, but they weighed with unexpected clarity. "I like being with Mommy because she sings songs at night," Lily said. "But I also like being with Alex. He listens when I talk. He doesn't rush." When asked where she wanted to live, she paused and whispered, "Can I just stay with both of them?" The courtroom fell silent. That single question cut through the tension more effectively than any lawyer. The judge leaned back, took a deep breath, and said something that stayed with Alex for a long time. "This child is not a puzzle to be solved. She is a person to be supported, and both of you must grow into that." The final ruling allowed Emma to accept the job, but only if Alex was granted an equal role. The judge proposed a shared custody agreement with scheduled flights, extended visits, and mandatory co-parenting coordination. Alex would be part of school decisions, medical care, summer plans, and everything else that mattered. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't easy. But it was a bridge. After the hearing, Emma met him outside the courtroom. She asked if she could stay with both of them, Alex said in a low voice. Emma nodded. That's all I truly cared about, that she felt safe enough to say that. They stood there for a moment, no longer enemies, not quite friends. Just two people bound by something deeper than pain or paperwork. A little girl who had reminded them both what mattered most. A remade family. The first few months after the custody ruling felt like walking a tightrope, suspended between two cities, two lives, and a small heart in the middle. Coordinating schedules between New York and Boston wasn't easy. They arranged flights, shared calendars, and rewrote routines. It required patience, compromise, and constant communication. Things that once seemed impossible between Alex and Emma. But now, for Lily's sake, they both tried. And sometimes, to their quiet surprise, it worked. Alex rented a small apartment in Boston to avoid disrupting Lily's school life. It wasn't luxurious like his penthouse in Manhattan, but it was warm and filled with things that mattered. A bookshelf with her favorite stories, taped-up drawings she had made for him, and a hand-painted Lily's Corner sign she insisted he put on her bedroom wall. He cooked her dinner on weekends. He learned to braid her hair, poorly at first, but with enough practice to earn her giggles. And he even attended her superhero dress-up day at preschool, showing up in a business suit and a silly homemade cape, just because she asked. Every week, he made sure their time together felt stable, not borrowed. It was no longer about spoiling her or making up for lost years. It was about consistency, presence, being there for the bedtime stories, the scraped knees, and the tears when her toy frog was lost in a grocery store. These things, he learned, mattered far more than anything money could buy. There were challenges, too. Sometimes Lily cried when it was time to leave one parent for the other. Sometimes she acted out, overwhelmed by the transitions. Once, she asked him why adults made things so complicated, and Alex didn't have a good answer. He just hugged her and promised he was learning. And he meant it. His relationship with Emma also began to change. They started finding a rhythm in their co-parenting. Conversations that were once sharp and defensive now had moments of lightness, even humor. They started sharing stories about Lily's quirks, laughing about her mischief, worrying together when she had a fever. And every now and then, during those shared moments, something unspoken passed between them. A flicker of what used to be, mixed with the familiar edge of what they were becoming. One quiet December night, after Lily had fallen asleep in his apartment, Emma stopped by to pick up a school project Lily had forgotten. It was late, and snow had just begun to fall, soft flakes piling on the windowsill. She walked in and paused at the door to Lily's room, watching her sleep. Alex stood beside her, silent, unsure if he should say anything. "She looks a lot like you when she's thinking," Emma whispered. "But does she laugh like I did at her age?" Alex felt a pang. "She's better than both of us." Emma smiled faintly, still looking at her daughter. "Maybe because now we have both of us." They didn't speak for a moment, wrapped in a shared silence that felt soft instead of heavy. Then she turned to leave, but paused at the door. "I found something the other day," she said, "when we were moving. A letter, one you wrote years ago. You never sent it." His stomach twisted. He remembered the letter. A clumsy, belated apology written the night she left, but never mailed. "I read it," she continued. "I'm glad I didn't read it then. I wouldn't have believed a word of it, but now—" She paused. Then she looked at him. Her expression wasn't angry, nor was it nostalgic. It was something softer, harder to name. Now I think maybe you meant it." "I did," he said quietly. She nodded again. Then she left, leaving behind the faint scent of winter air and something that felt almost like peace. That night, after closing the door and checking on Lily one last time, Alex stood alone in the quiet of his apartment. He thought of the time he had lost, the version of himself who let people walk away, the man who once said, "I don't want to see you again." And now, here he was, on the other side of that moment, changed not by success or redemption, but by a little girl with dark brown hair and sky-blue eyes who had taught him to show up, to stay, to be still, and to start over. The only treasure that matters. Spring arrived slowly in Boston, clearing the last lingering signs of winter, with soft winds and trees beginning to bloom in pale pinks and early greens. Lily's world, now split between two cities, had begun to feel whole in ways no one had expected. She moved between her parents like someone who had always known how to navigate two sets of rhythms. And for the first time, Alex didn't feel like a visitor in her life. He felt like a father. He had begun restructuring his job around her schedule. Business trips were booked only on the weeks she was with Emma. Late meetings were held remotely or rescheduled entirely. His priorities had shifted so completely that even his closest friends noticed, though no one dared to question it. They just watched as the man who once measured time only in quarters now measured it in bedtime stories, finger paintings, and moments of "Daddy, can I teach you something?" The apartment he had rented in Boston began to transform. It no longer felt temporary. Lily had filled it with her things, a small keyboard in the corner, bookshelves stacked with books and stuffed animals, bright art taped to the refrigerator. Weekends were spent making pancakes, always too thick, always a little burnt, but always eaten with sticky fingers and giggles. She liked to sit on the kitchen counter while he cooked, swinging her legs and offering unsolicited advice. "Don't forget the vanilla this time," she said, looking at him like a small supervisor. "Last time, they tasted like nothing." "They did," he admitted. Emma and Alex had also started talking more freely, exchanging updates without tension, even sharing a joke or two when dropping off Lily. One night, after a parent-teacher conference, they ended up walking the long way home, side by side, their hands brushing occasionally. They didn't talk about the past. They didn't talk about what they were. But something had changed. There was warmth between them again, not forced, not nostalgic, just real. Then, one afternoon, Lily brought everything to the surface without even realizing it. They were sitting on a park bench, one of those with chipped green paint and carved initials in the wood. She was eating a popsicle, the bright red juice dripping down her hand, and staring at the playground. Without turning around, she asked, "Do you think we could all live in the same house someday?" Alex felt the air leave his lungs. He looked at her, unsure how to answer. "What makes you ask that?" She shrugged. "It would be easier, fewer bags to pack, and I think Mommy smiles more now that you're around." He looked at her and smiled gently. "That's a big decision. It's not just about packing bags." "I know," she said simply. "I just think maybe it would be nice." He didn't promise anything. It wasn't necessary. The fact that she had said it, that she even imagined it, meant something had healed, or was healing. That night, he walked Emma back to her building after dropping off Lily. They lingered by the door a moment longer than usual. Neither of them spoke. Then, in a low voice, Alex said, "She asked me if we'd ever live in the same house." Emma didn't look surprised. "She asked me the same thing last week." He laughed softly, the sound wrapped in something fond. "And what did you say?" "I said I didn't know," Emma said, "but I liked that she wanted it." There was a long pause. Their eyes met. And for the first time since that night years ago when she had walked out of his life, the space between them didn't feel like an emptiness. It felt like a bridge. Neither made a grand declaration. There were no sweeping gestures, no promises made under the moonlight. But when Emma leaned in and kissed him softly on the mouth before going inside, it wasn't with hesitation. It wasn't with confusion. It was a beginning. Alex stood in the darkness for a long time afterward, watching the light turn on in Lily's window. He thought of all the ways life could change, not through force, not through plans, but through small moments like this. A wish from a little girl, a quiet kiss, a shared walk through the city. It wasn't about fixing what was broken. It was about building what came next, together, with softness, with honesty. The morning of Lily's 6th birthday arrived with the kind of sunshine that made everything feel golden. The apartment smelled of vanilla and fresh fruit, the remnants of the cake Alex had stayed up late decorating the night before. There were balloons taped to the walls, a hand-drawn banner with crooked letters across the living room window, and a pile of wrapped gifts on the kitchen table. But the brightest part of it all was Lily herself, in a shimmering silver dress, her hair curled at the ends the way she liked it, and a smile wide enough to light up the whole block. They had decided, all three of them, to hold the party in the local community garden, where Lily loved chasing butterflies in the summer. It was simple, colorful, open, and full of things that made her happiest. Flowers, open sky, and friends. Emma arrived early to help set up, and when Alex saw her step out of the car with 2 trays of cupcakes and a basket of party favors, he couldn't help but smile. She wore a soft blue summer dress, her hair curled, and her eyes bright. There was no tension between them now. There hadn't been for a long time. They moved around each other with ease, with naturalness, finishing each other's sentences, laughing when Lily invented her own rules for the party games, and sharing glances that spoke of things old and quietly new. The guests began to arrive. Classmates, neighbors, a few cousins who had flown in with their parents. The air filled with conversation and music, the scent of lemonade and icing, and the sounds of children screaming over who got the last piece of watermelon. Alex watched it all, amazed at how full his life had become. There was a time, not long ago, when he wouldn't have been able to handle so much chaos, so much emotion. But now he felt steady, present, grateful. At the center of everything was Lily, spinning in circles with her friends, her laughter bubbling up like a song. She moved freely between Alex and Emma, grabbing one hand, then the other, making them dance, making them sit beside her during cake, making them both parts of her world, without question. To her, this was normal. 2 parents, 1 family, built not by design, not by shouting, but by love, remade with time and intention. As the party wound down, the sun casting long golden shadows across the garden, the children gathered for one last moment. Lily's teacher, who had kindly offered to help coordinate activities, announced that Lily wanted to say something. The children quieted down. The parents gathered around, and Lily stood on a wooden crate with a plastic crown tilted on her head. She looked at everyone, her blue eyes shining, and said, "Thank you for coming to my party. It's the best birthday ever, but I want to say something to my mom and dad." The crowd quieted. Alex and Emma exchanged a quick glance, unsure of what was coming. Lily held a small piece of paper she had folded and unfolded a dozen times that day. "I wrote a wish," she said, "and I want to say it now." She cleared her throat, her voice careful but strong. "My wish is that we always stay together, not just for birthdays, but every day, because when we're all together, it feels like the sun is always out, even when it rains." There was a moment of silence before the applause started, soft at first, then warm and full. Emma wiped the corner of her eye, Alex blinked harder than necessary. After the guests left, after the folding chairs were put away, and the last cupcake was wrapped in foil, they stood together in the quiet. Just the three of them. Lily sat on Alex's lap, drowsy but happy, and Emma stood close to him, her hand brushing his. "She's something special," Emma whispered. "She's everything," Alex said. Emma looked at him, her face thoughtful. "You know, we could start slow, no rush, but maybe see where this goes." Alex didn't speak for a moment. He looked at her, then at Lily, and back at her. He reached out and took Emma's hand fully this time. Not just a brush or a moment, a choice. "I already know where it's going," he said in a low voice. "Home." As they walked back to the car, with Lily between them, holding both their hands, the sky above them slowly shifted from gold to lavender. The evening was quiet, but alive. Not perfect, but real. A remade family, not from who they used to be, but from who they had become. Stronger, braver, together. Open continuation. The challenge of the new normal. A year had passed since Lily's birthday, and Alex and Emma's quiet decision to try living together again. They moved into a new penthouse in New York, a neutral space built for three. Life was no longer the freezing tension of the past, nor the thrill of the reconciliation. Instead, it was the raw, chaotic reality of family life. Alex continued to juggle his investment firm duties with the obligations of fatherhood. He was still learning to balance profit spreadsheets with homework drama and bedtime tantrums. Emma, having taken a leadership role in NYC, fought to ensure her career. What she built when she was alone wasn't swallowed by the new demands of being a complete family. Lily was the center of it all, thriving with both parents' constant presence. She stopped asking about moving and finally started calling Alex Daddy, a word that still made his heart race. Yet the space between Alex and Emma was complex. They were excellent co-parents, communicating about schedules, doctors, and school projects with military precision. But the romantic relationship was stalled. They slept in separate rooms, claiming it was better for Lily's transition. They were life partners out of obligation and love for their daughter, but the fire that once united them and the pain that separated them still maintained a cautious distance. One evening, after an exhausting children's birthday party that they worked through as a perfect team, Alex and Emma were washing dishes. "We're quite the team, aren't we?" Emma asked, drying a plate with a tired smile. "The best," Alex agreed. A silence fell. Alex realized they had a routine, but not a life. He looked at Emma, noticing the fine lines of tiredness around her eyes and her hair pulled up haphazardly. He still found her beautiful, but the fear of messing things up again was paralyzing. "What's going to happen with us, Alex?" Emma asked, her voice low. "Are we well-coordinating roommates, or are we going to try to be something more?" Alex stopped what he was doing, the water dripping from his hands. He knew Lily's stability depended on them finding an answer. He had learned to be a father. Now he had to relearn how to be a husband. He turned to Emma, the city humming quietly outside. "I don't know," he admitted, the honesty weighing on him. "I know I rebuilt my world around you, but what comes next isn't in the blueprints. It's in us. The only thing we can do is figure out if the stability we created for Lily is strong enough to give us a chance to fall in love again." They stood there, looking at each other in their pristine new kitchen. The answer wasn't in Alex's profit spreadsheets, nor in Emma's career ambitions. It was in an open question that hung over them. Can the stability they found as parents reignite the passion they lost as lovers? And if so, when will they finally be brave enough to cross the threshold of that bedroom door? This ending leaves their romantic fate unresolved. If you'd like to explore this next step, we could write the next chapter about the moment they decide to address this open question and see if they can be a couple again.